All right, everybody, welcome to the K-Dome, Microdome, the multiverse at this year's Digital Burning Man. My name is, hi there. I'm Lauren Taus. I'm a psychedelic psychotherapist based in Venice Beach, and I am immensely excited and humbled to host this panel on transformative justice and psychedelics with some epic beings who have a lot of wisdom and a lot of work to share. And we can just begin with each of you introducing yourselves.
So hi everyone, my name is Charlotte James. I am the co-creator of the Sabina Project. I'm a long-time harm reductionist and psychedelic explorer. And the Sabina Project is a Black-led psychedelic education, training, and harm reduction to return reverence to sacred earth medicine and our ancestral practices and traditions.
Yeah, I'm Drea, Wright. I'm also part of the Sabina Project, and I'm thankful to be here. I'm a combo practitioner, and I'm thankful to be able to support people in the healing practice. And yeah, thankful to be here. Excited to get into it.
I'm Joseph McCowan. I'm a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. I'm based in Venice, California, and currently I'm working with a nonprofit called St. Joseph Center in Venice, which provides mental health support to low-income and folks on the street. And I'm a clinical supervisor and trainer there. And I'm also working with the LA site for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy as a co-therapist, which is located in Hollywood. And last year I was trained by MAPS in their Therapist of Color training, which was the first of its kind, and which occurred last August in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was a beautiful gathering. Tons of wisdom there. And yeah, just very passionate about advancing education and access to historically underserved and underrepresented communities.
Yeah.
And really excited to be here with you all and grateful for this conversation.
Powerful panelists, I'm so excited. So we're just gonna dive right in with a big question, which is the whiteness of the psychedelic research community. Like what does transformative justice look like, and how do we begin to repair the harms?
Tell the truth.
Yeah.
I speak the truth. Like, you know, part of why the West is so comfortable claiming, authority over these issues is because of their, focus on scarcity versus abundance. It's pretty consistent behavior pattern. So, shedding light on like our ancestors who have very effectively used lots of entheogens all over the world for a long time, and look at how they do it and give them a lot of respect. Also, the medicines themselves, see them as a relationship versus some type of something to commoditize or synthesize. A little bit more respect.
Yeah, I mean, we know that over time, over the history of psychedelic research, over 80% of participants in those studies have been white. And very frequently, these studies focus on mental challenges like PTSD, which is often associated with folks who have been in combat, but we really don't think about or talk frequently enough about the PTSD of being Black in America, being brown, being queer, being poor. And so I think it's really shifting the conversation on which communities could truly benefit from from increased access to these healing modalities.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Everything that both of you just stated, as well as, Charlotte, you were referring to the lack of representation in certain research spaces. And, it's really being intentional about bringing new voices, Black, Indigenous, people of color, to the table, and centering these voices. And these, some have been at the fringe for a while, but it's going to really require like intentional centering and, really deep listening to folks that have about issues impacting communities that are non-white, and envisioning or imagining models of care that are, outside of the individual model of care, which we know is not really supporting people of color with the various areas of need that they have. And those models of care can be, or it's necessary that they're going to be influenced by people of color as well. So that are really familiar with and know the challenges that people are experiencing at the community level. Yeah, and I mean, the representation is so huge because like people feel a sense of safety when they're seen and when they're heard in therapy or in any setting. And so, all of these elements are really huge and key.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about a return to ancestral practice as a form of harm reduction. This idea of like learning from what our ancestors did, the ways, the settings in which they used these medicines, the relationships that they built with each other, with medicine people, with the medicine itself, and letting that inform how we build this out. I think also thinking about the level of physical, mental, and spiritual vulnerability that you are at when you are under the influence of these medicines, and doing this journey work, and the stigma as well. We talk a lot about like the stigma around people of color using drugs, which has been brought on by the war on drugs, which is a tool that's used to oppress us. So it's this like cyclical barrier to access of like, and it's really wonderful that institutions like MAPS are starting to do these knowledge exchanges with therapists of color to learn like how do we make these research settings welcoming to more than just white men permanently. And because there's even in articles that have been written about the research that has been done and that it is 80% white, it's that there were cases where like a person of color showed up and all of the observers were white and they did the study because they were uncomfortable. So thinking about that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, right. I mean, just considering the harm that's caused when the therapist that might be working on a study, right, and a person of color comes in and the person that's working with them is not familiar with their own cultural practices or healing modalities, and is there might be microaggressions that are occurring in that space, right? And so it's more than like cultural competency. It's really representation, right? And people, folks of color, like literally being in the space. And because the familiarity with the techniques and approaches and the connection and there's just safety inherent in seeing ourselves represented.
Because even if you think about this in the context of the larger medicalized like institution of the US and the relationship that communities of color have with medical institutions, like there's already such distrust because we were literally used as test subjects for many years. I mean, we're in Baltimore City, we're right by Hopkins. In like old school Baltimore, the thing that you would say to scare your kids is like, don't act up because the Hopkins boogeyman will come and snatch you and do tests on you. And so like when that is the narrative of the relationship between communities of color and medical institutions, it's highly unlikely, or it's very understandable why there is this disconnect and incredible need for representation within the research model.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the historical harms are many. Go ahead.
What did you say again?
There's just the historical harms in these types of settings are just so many.
Yeah.
How does psychedelic harm reduction differ for different communities?
Well, I find that the types of integrations that we experience and the types of conversations we experience are more the conversations are less about experience, your experience, and the type of medicine, all the science behind it, but more about like, what are you working through? What habits are you looking to let go that no longer serve you? And I found that when I was in some spaces that were not BIPOC, there was a lot of that conversation. So I feel like that's one of the things I've noticed different. And there's also there's less resistance to the appreciation and respect for ancestral ways.
This is very true. Yes. Yeah.
There's a deep desire to connect with your ancestral ways versus this almost this attitude as if, well, those are savages, and we've got a smarter, better, more sophisticated way of doing this, and let's call it harm reduction versus ceremony, right? Let's make it more complicated and less accessible to more people, and then the only people who can support people in this are people who also have lots of privilege and not disconnected. So then there's also this other issue where, you're making it a pharmaceutical drug and then making it inaccessible to people. But there's more of awareness, I feel like, in the BIPOC community about that back in reality, resistance to it, like really wanting to talk to the healers who have some ancient experience. Less trust in the pharmaceutical model. What else do you notice?
Charlotte, you mentioned the war on drugs and that legacy. Remains, right? And so if you look at communities of color, there is people just don't feel safe using psychedelics in their own communities, and and also communities are often disempowered rather than empowered to like create safe spaces, and so with that, you're kind of looking at where's the right setting for like a psychedelic experience, right? And so it's really getting kind of creative about creating those safe spaces, and also there's a component of like culturally sensitive like education and right, and there's a lot of myths and such inaccurate information, misinformation in communities. So right information to dispel those myths, and it's like I often consider psychedelic spaces often like grow and burgeon and develop in many white spaces kind of with ease relatively. And I see like there's so many inherent challenges to that in communities of color, like especially with police activity and such. So it's you know, one thing I appreciate about the studies is like they are becoming more intentional about bringing folks of color like into to experience like you know, MDMA assisted psychotherapy, for example, and you know that's like the safety and support is kind of like inherent in that process, and they really ensure that there is that a person is connected to support and has like a safe space from what they're like launching and returning to. But still, there's a lot of inherent challenges in certain communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you really touched on this in like the different types of education that different communities will need around psychedelics and safe use and things like that. So like I think we even had this realization that we had like jumped too far down the rabbit hole based on our own personal experience. We're like, let's do these workshops that are like, you know, Huachuma 101 and this one, and realizing that like really the conversation has to start at like, what is a plant medicine? Like what is my first journey? How do I safely take my first trip? How do I start to build an intentional relationship with these medicines? So thinking about that. And then on the flip side of that, in the predominantly white community, it's like, how do you have conversations about like, yes, you're really excited about figuring out that like you're connected to everyone and we're spiritual beings and but like, let's not hop five stones down the path and like spiritual bypass the fact that like, yes, in the spirit realm, like we're all one, cosmically made of carbon, but like in this current 3D realm, that is not the reality. So how do you take your learnings, how do you like take your learnings from this cosmic space and integrate them into affecting widespread like systemic change?
And yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
I was thinking, and then you go first.
Just that interestingly, I saw a medicine person on Instagram talking recently who had like direct indigenous Amazonian lineage, like direct, I think they were from Peru. And that they had this like whole realization that if anybody taking their class could no longer claim that they had been like past this tradition from her unless they were willing to take a class on cultural appropriation and start their journey by like recognizing their own biases and their own desire to learn another tradition. We also had a conversation this morning with Annie Oak, and she was talking specifically about like doing research around European shamanic traditions, which I think is super interesting.
Right.
As a biracial person, I also think it's very interesting. Like I can very easily connect, you know, first generation on one side. So like, it's real easy to tie quickly back to your first gen roots. I mean, not easy, but easier. But it's much harder than to try to like connect back into even more interrupted lineages, which if we think about where whiteness is now and the fact that all traditions or all cultures have shamanic traditions, there's like a massive interrupt in that. And it's like, go back and figure, you know, bring in a moon ceremony. And like Freya, that sounds dope. I want to hear about that. But like, we don't all need to be going to somebody else's traditions. And if we do, we have to do it in a way that's based in reverence, just like the reverence we have for the plants.
Definitely. And, you know, I think it's important that we're also thinking about and considering folks that in communities of color that are like psychedelically naive and might be having like their first experiences. And you know, I know many that are veterans, but I also know many who have just, you know, never had an experience. Or again, there's that lots of myths around psychedelics and certain things, lots of misinformation. But so, you know, these can be very powerful experiences. And so the integration piece and building that in and having POC integration workers like or healers available, you know, I've just talked with others about like building a POC like integration list. I mean, that's just like a start, right? But
Yeah.
So yeah, really helping getting the support in place for people to navigate like these difficult experiences.
Yeah.
Not difficult, but you know, can bring up,
Potentially challenging.
yeah.
I think we live in such a disintegrated world, right? Where there's these artificial hierarchies that have very real implications on bodies. And I'm curious what role anti-racism plays as transformative justice within the psychedelic community.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that this ties nicely back into the conversation around spiritual bypassing that has come up more frequently and more recently. Yeah, there are a lot of folks in the psychedelic and plant medicine communities that definitely want us to skip ahead and say that if we just don't talk about race, that race is not a problem. That, you know, can't we all just recognize that we are one human, you know, we're all Homo sapiens, we're all this. And it's, I think the work then is in recognizing that getting to that point too quickly is like not doing the full peeling of the layers on your own story. And that we need, it's beautiful to be able to like have that experience. For people of color as well, it is beautiful to be able to have that experience of we're all one, that like surging of love and joy is really wonderful, and can inspire a lot of really great work. The important thing though is then like coming back into this realm and recognizing what's actually happening here and how you can use the lessons in the downloads or the uploads and use that to actually impact community-wide change.
Well, isn't that kind of though, like, to your point though, isn't it a very Western idea to decide for someone like where your suffering should begin and end, right? And in an ancestral tradition, there's not really anybody telling you the spiritual bypassing is not really an option, right? Because it's about you doing your own individual work. I don't really know what's right for you. You know what's right for you. And like there's a level of arrogance that would make someone feel comfortable telling you, oh, just get over that. Move on, move past that and just get to the we are one. Like that's endemic in like a Western perspective anyway. It's about the approach to the medicine that causes people to feel comfortable to even make that, to create that conversation, right? Which goes back to the conversation that we always have, which is like a lot of this has to do with the way we approach these medicines and the reasons why we use these medicines. Is for an experience. I want to have an experience versus I'm looking to transform myself so that I can help support transforming the world. It's the why that I'm having these experiences in the first place, right? The West is all about, well, let's have an experience.
Or the escapism of it, of like, oh my God, this world is so hard. Like, I'm just going to go to the cosmic space where we're all fairy people. And you're like, I mean, that'd be nice.
I mean,
it's not real.
You know, one thing I so appreciate about psychedelic communities is that, you know, there is a great deal of envisioning for the collective and deep personal work people are doing, and, you know, embracing our interconnectedness and of our world and humanity. At the same time, we can always take things a little bit further, and each of us can like do more, and like, where are we actually exploring and what are we doing, right? And so we all have the ability to speak out against or stop supporting practices and policies that are actually causing people harm or maintaining harmful power dynamics, or and we might find those places or areas where we might have been causing harm, or like we might have been supporting these things. And if we can see that we can, if we can look more deeply at like some of these systems and the history behind them, and the legacies of oppression, and and more deeply connect to and listen to the voices of people of color, right? It's like, if we're building community and if we're connecting, are we deeply listening, and who are we listening to, and what voices are we centering? And this is all harm reduction, right? Doing these things, and if even the personal exploration and how the truth we bring into spaces can be harm reduction.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's also, harm is also tied to our inaction, right? Like what we're not doing and what we're not talking about.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think this is what I was trying to touch on with this. Like, if you are doing medicine work, trying to do medicine work in an intentional way, and you're getting to the point of spiritual bypassing, of course, it's not my role to say this is what you need to work on, but it's like, how are you able to get to that place of saying that you don't need to not participate in these structures, and that we don't need to like dismantle these things while having these experiences of interconnectedness.
Right, that's the work.
Yeah, that is the work, exactly.
That's the work, and it's about the approach.
Yeah.
The reason why.
I think there's also something that you said, Joseph, that made me think about also like where the larger psychedelic community is including the BIPOC psychedelic community that's like surging, and sort of the types of like discussions. I think especially given the current climate and everything that's happening around movements to abolish or defund the police and the war on drugs, that there is a prime moment to be having a conversation around anti-racism and transformative justice in the psych, and it's absolutely so necessary, and an honor to be at the beginning of it. And I'm also excited to see when we get to like move to the place where the BIPOC community is, where we're just having general conversations about psychedelics and healing and plant medicine that don't necessarily have to be about how do we get included, or how do we encourage anti-racism work in the psychedelic community, because hopefully the movement will get to a place where it is a movement, and we do have a value stance around valuing all human lives and uplifting those in our communities who are struggling more in these moments. So it will be really interesting to see over the next few years, like how this morphs, because it will be like harm reduction in all of these areas, and having BIPOC folks show up and speak in all of these areas will be a form of harm reduction. Sorry, the spirits in my house are really they're going well right now.
They're loving what you're saying. Go Sharp!
The psychedelic community, I feel, has such rich potential to be a bridge between what was and what can be. And as the way that psychedelics work, they open up intergenerational space. They open up transpersonal space.
Yeah.
And, my Charlotte and Drea, you'll love this one. I want to know, how do we integrate ancestral traditions into transformative justice?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be so simple, but I really think the practice, it's something about the practice of these traditions, like begins to like the level of reverence, not all these traditions, but many of these traditions, the level of reverence and respect and appreciation and relationship that is required in these causes you to have a level of humility and awareness to get to the point where any suffering is like is unsustainable. Like it doesn't matter whether you can relate to that person's point of view or not. Their suffering is intolerable, right? To you, right? You want May all beings know loving kindness, not some, the ones that look like me, all beings. And if not, like, how am I contributing, like you said, to the suffering, or eliminating or alleviating the suffering? Like that is so much the work that we're doing here, right? 7 generations, supporting the next 7 generations of our kin. And if you really believe in this idea that like we are all one, right? Then isn't your responsibility to take care of the one who is suffering, the part of you that is suffering? Yeah, so it's interesting how somehow some folks they miss that message. And they stay under like me. Yeah, right? But all of us, me and all of us. Yeah.
I think it's important not to romanticize all ancestral practice and all indigenous tradition. That there are, of course, like violence has always been a part of human existence, and attempting to create hierarchy and structures and things like that. But there was a time when we did all live in like pre-colonial connected to the land, ancestral, well, in that time, not ancestral, just the way of living, right?
Right.
There are shamanic traditions from every single culture around the world. And there was a time when Black and white and man and woman and human did not exist, like these divisions didn't exist in the way that we have them now, right? Like it is true that most of the things that we fear about each other have been completely socially constructed. And I think you have to like be careful about this line of conversation, because then people will be like, well, if it's socially constructed, then it's not real. That's not a direct connection, but it is true that there was a time when whiteness and Blackness and brownness and indigenousness was not understood in the way that we understand it now. And so thinking about returning to the beautiful parts of ancestral practice, the parts of respect and reverence, of communal living, of mutual aid, all of those things will be so key to transformative justice in all communities, and not just in the BIPOC community.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt, all of it. Like when I think of like reimagining and recreating like models of care that are, less harmful, we see, these have been modeled before. Right, like we can just almost look to previous models, and if you just care and accountability are like woven into the fabric of many of these traditions, and things are operating at such like a large scale now. Like people feel so disconnected and removed from things, right? Like a person goes to prison, they're gone, right? They're no longer there. Or like even landfills are just like, our trash is so far away. It's not in front of us. And, if we're like redesigning things and really building sustainable, like often we like, I know some of my neighbors, but I don't know all of my neighbors, but like, we could, in the ways in which we're building community and connecting with folks, and it's often we're not even doing so in our immediate surroundings, or like connected to our immediate environments. And I think the wisdom of ancestral traditions can like bring us back to reorienting, as well as just like reconnecting. And I think there's a lot of wisdom there, and it's almost like where we can look as we visualize and envision new ways.
How is psychedelic therapy different from regular therapy, Joseph? And how does psychedelic therapy uniquely contribute to transformative justice?
Yeah, so certainly I think the biggest thing is psychedelic therapy in most of its models are really huge on like not pathologizing, you know, like
Mm.
whatever a person is bringing is completely all right and what we're working with, you know, like there might be like a diagnostic consideration for the purposes of like a study design, right? But there isn't, you know, it's like that label is not really placed on a person so much. And, you know, it also works, they work from a place of knowing that everyone has what they need, like internally, right? Whether inner healer. If that can be fostered with a supportive and safe environment. And so, you know, while people might have trauma, for example, what's more recognized is that people have strength and resilience that have come out of that. And that's what can be developed and built. And, you know, so really just like a very focused on folks' strengths and the capacity to heal and grow and you know, just like fostering that and providing that support. And really, it's non-directive, it's really deep listening and connecting and hearing and helping and allowing that person to have their experience. And it's really powerful, which is not always the case in traditional therapy.
It is.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I've definitely never had psychedelic therapy.
Yeah,
Just the regular kinds.
I had a great. I was lucky enough to have a experience with my counselor, and I had taken some mushrooms, and man, it was amazing. The first 15 minutes, I had a repressed memory, and forgave my father, and then started working on the mom stuff. So I had like 40 minutes left. What are we going to work on next? It was great. Yeah, it was great.
In what ways are current models of diagnosing and treating mental illness more harmful than good in individuals and for communities?
I can start with that. You know, there's a couple of layers to this. It's, you know, we've already talked a bit about, you know, traditional Western model is a person sitting in therapy one-on-one with a provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that in and of itself is already kind of like isolating and distancing from a community. And you know, whereas there might be, person might need support with others in their setting and on various levels, right? They might need support, you know, in a holistic way, body, mind, soul, spirit. Then there's the representation piece. People of color are often not interacting with therapists that are from their communities, that are not often aware of their challenges and experiences, and also often not aware of even how to effectively support folks with what they're bringing or dealing with. And so, you know, again, some people like literally may and often do disengage from therapy and don't return after their first experience with a provider that doesn't where they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard. And then especially in communities of color, there's limited options, right? And there's historical harm. There's already kind of like a just general distrust with with the healthcare system. So, I mean, and then you add to that like diagnostic labels, which of themselves are very isolating and alienating. Useful for some purposes, but at the same time, the person can carry a lot of shame once they've like been given a diagnosis, and they might even withdraw in distance based on that. And then, you know, they're internalizing like what they're dealing with, right? Like, I have depression, right? And almost it's removing from what else is going on around them. And so it's sometimes almost combines with, you have a therapist who's not really seeing the context of and the environmental stuff, contributing to the issues. And you also have an individual who is getting feedback. It's like, it's me, it's my problem. And here I am to deal with it. And so it's, as we like move forward, like really recreating models and developing ones that are more holistic and that are treating people on various levels, and people feel connection and belonging.
Does group therapy or group contexts offer something uniquely needed and specific versus individual when addressing historical traumas?
Yeah, so again, it's, if we can remove, like if we can decenter, right, and kind of like build a group, then people are looking to each other for support. And there's also greater accountability. We're all like supporting one another. And even just that does a lot for each and every person in that group. And, there's also shared experiences, right? It's like people feel heard and seen. There might be another person or multiple others in that shared space that are going through something similar. And it's like there's connection. I've been part of many groups, and they kind of just function organically, and it's a beautiful thing, and very different than individual therapy in many ways. And but I think the biggest is kind of the belonging and the accountability for each other, and just like just the feedback from the group. It's like we hear you, we feel you, we know, we see you. Recognize your experience. I'm having a similar experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is making me think a lot about like the integration circle as group therapy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what you were like touching on earlier, of like our circles tend not to be about like, whoa, I saw this crazy whatever and I took a huge amount of mushrooms and blah, 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 but more about this like, hey, I had this experience in my journey that like is challenging, or I'm having this experience with my family that's challenging, and do other people have experiences like that? And yeah.
I remember one of the first circles we did, it may have been the third or fourth circle, and an individual started talking about their mom, their relationship with their mom. Mm-hmm. And then another person said, oh, and it was like a whole Mom's Day conversation. Yeah. And it was really beautiful. And they shared, and each person could relate to, oh yeah, I have some issues with my parent. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And I would also imagine that the general stigmas around seeking support for mental health, the stigma in the BIPOC community, the difficulty of actually accessing counselors and therapists, the fact that even in that realm, without the psychedelic part, there's very little representation. And of course, I think the conversation has rapidly increased and around wellness in BIPOC, especially in the Black community. And there are like websites you can go to now to like find Black therapists and things like that. But, that is also going to be a huge hurdle of just like, have you considered going to therapy? Now also, would you take substances in that therapy that will like make you more mentally and spiritually vulnerable, so there's just so many layers to it.
What are some of the biggest barriers in psychedelic exploration within the BIPOC community?
Cost.
Stigma, cost. Stigma and cost. I think.
And access, like there's there's not a the likelihood that you're going to be in a conversation and another person of color saying talking about ayahuasca, their ayahuasca experience. I mean, a lot of us, that's how we you in a dinner party,
Yeah.
And someone mentions, oh, tell me more about that. Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, you're in a ceremony.
I mean, that was really transformative for me. That was the other thing I was going to say about group therapy, but like the medicine circle as group therapy as well. And the relationships that you build with the people that you may be sitting for or with as you're doing your healing work. And once you find those people, like the transformation that I've been able to see in myself from like years of just sort of recreational use, what we would deem recreational use, and then like actually finding other people that I could talk about it with, that I could like dive into the deeper realm of it with, made it much easier than thinking about doing that on my own. So yeah, I think finding other people can be challenging in the BIPOC community because of the stigma and the cost and the access as well. So
right, and also it tends to be a more severe consequence if you are a person of color and you're caught with a Schedule I substance.
Yeah, circling back to the war on drugs from the beginning of this conversation. So that too.
I want to plug real quick the Mutual Ceremony Fund, which is part of the Sabina Project, and creating a pool of resources to support the BIPOC community in safely having experiences. So the website will be included at the end of the conversation, but it's such an important cause. So I just want to make sure that that's named and stated, that that's available to give to and potentially to draw from for people who are looking for experiences.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and with regards to like barriers to exploration, right? Like if you think about historical barriers to exploration just in general, right? Like colonialism, right? There were explorers and then there were oppressed people at the time, or there were colonizers. And, there are still legacies of that, right? So just look at like Burning Man, for example. I've actually never been, but I heard it's predominantly white.
It is.
Which is, not like, I don't think that's Burning Man's own issue, but like, that's just kind of what it currently is, right? And so, but I think often a lot of people of color see that space and like even envision kind of going there and from a distance, it's like, well, that's kind of like a white privilege space. That type of freedom of exploration is kind of like, that's like outside of the realm of what we can do or feel safe there, like using substances, forget about it, right? So, like, it's almost like a carryover from colonialism and for people of color, like not feeling safe and like that exploration is also a carryover from like oppression and slavery. Just to share like a personal story, when I was young, my dad would take us camping, and I remember asking him, why are we like every time we go camping, we're the only Black people camping?
Oh wow!
And he was like, well, where my family's from in the South, like African Americans like just couldn't go into the woods, like we ended up like killed or lynched, and he was just very, very honest about like these things even when I was young. And but I'm grateful for those experiences because like that's kind of where I find my freedom and where I do a lot of exploration now. Like I find safety in it now, but historically and still today there's a lot of Black folks who are not going to to the woods or to the outdoors because of the legacy of historical like harms, right?
And
I think similarly with psychedelics, we can if there's exposure and then there's safety, and if that can be found over time, then there can be true exploration. But right now, if people are really don't feel safe and are really cautious about engaging with that.
Yeah,
agreed.
We literally, this was like a big part of our conversation this morning with Annie Oak as well, thinking about like how powerful having a connection to nature is, but how interrupted our connection to nature has been because of colonialism. And then this history, especially in the US, of the fear of going into the woods, and what happens in the woods. And even today, I will also add a very quick personal anecdote, but just 2 weeks ago, my partner is a naturist, and we went to a nudist camp, and we convinced 13 other people to come social distance camping, and most of them were BIPOC folks. And within 5 hours on the first night, 2 Black women in our group were followed by a white man in the dark while he screamed "White Lives Matter" at them. And it's like, this is in Pennsylvania, for real. I grew up there, so I can say that. But it's like, that's happening in a northern state in 2020, and we're trying to be here saying, in that case, like, let's go be free and naked in the woods. And in this case, like, let's go be free and, let's all go to the Amazon and like be in the woods in a place where you also don't speak the language. It's just like the hoops and the layers that have to be worked through are just so many that it's like, where do we start peeling?
Also, to go to Burning Man, you have to have a
So
significant
expensive.
amount of disposable income.
Yeah, and convincing, and like BIPOC folks, Black folks are about to drop like $3,000 on a vacation or not going to be in the desert for a week. Like, that's not, you're not about to convince them to do that. And I'm like, yeah. There is, well, I do want to uplift just really quickly. There is a really cool, it's called the Black Burner Project. The photographer who runs is actually a woman who's in the DMV, and we've been connected to her. And somebody also put out like a short Black Burner documentary on YouTube. That's really cool, because I think a lot of what we're saying is echoed there, is that like, yes, it looks like, or it is a very white space, but like the level of freedom that you feel once you get there, even as a Black person, is still really transformative. So it's definitely, it's on the list.
Yeah, we were on our way there.
I know, we were trying to be there. I was like, we're going to Burning Man on Zoom.
Well, here we are. Welcome to Burning Man.
Hey.
But yeah, I mean, the like the subsystem that is Burning Man cannot be separated from the larger system that it operates in, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I so appreciate the conversation about safety, and thank you for sharing your personal stories. I mean, full body chills when both of you shared about camping and the history and safety in nature. I mean, devastating.
Yeah.
And, so back to Burning Man. It is predominantly white. It is not all white, but I'm curious, in largely white spaces, in festival spaces, what are common microaggressions, and how can Burning Man or other festivals implement anti-racism as part of harm reduction?
Okay,
You have something to say about this.
I do. I really do. One of my closest friends and my college roommate is a burner. So I've never been to Burning Man, but I have been in many burner spaces. Cultures are not costumes. Cultures are also not party themes. This is like, these are like the little, it's like, it looks like a microaggression, but really it's like part of the burner culture itself is completely appropriative. And so it's like having to like peel that apart also, of like what you're wearing at Burning Man, what you're bringing, like all these sorts of things that I think like on a visual representation, like stop with the yarn dreadlocks, and like the like there's like so many. There was a party here, a party in Baltimore that was a burner party that was disco themed, that like encouraged people to wear Afro wigs. Like, don't do things like that. And then these communities would feel a little less not so microaggressive, but like aggressive.
Mm.
And not even aggressive, but like just passively complacent also, and defensive, like, oh, but it's my party, and like it's a party culture. It's like all of our actions indicate, or all of our actions speak to our values. And so I think that's a big one, and a conversation that's not had enough in the burner space.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I feel like sometimes I experience microaggression just even kind of thinking about all of it. You know, it's like, you know, the from way I see it, and this could be off, but like, I've, you know, looked at the history of Burning Man and such, and I don't see how it could have been started by like Black and brown folks, you know, like in San Francisco, or even relocating to the desert. And it is a, you know, it's very much like a privileged space.
Right.
And that is, I think, because most of the participants are white, you know, and so like, and then like, I you know, I do desire to arrive and attend one year, but at the same time, you know, I think like, if you look at principles of like radical inclusion, right? I think it's, I think it needs to be a little bit more radical, right? Like, so if we're talking about the inclusion and considering folks of color and like the financial obligations of it all, as well as, you know, I don't really know what outreach efforts and such look like to communities of color, but it seems like it's been pretty, pretty white for some time. So I would like to see more intentional efforts for inclusion.
Yeah. It's also kind of like a lot of burns, it's not that they're secretive, but figuring out how to like get, like literally just how you get a ticket, like those sorts of things. And for things like Burning Man, like, what am I packing? What camp am I in? How do I join a camp? Like, am I shipping my stuff? Do I drive out? There's someone in Baltimore, small shout out, her name is Emily Eaglin. She has a YouTube channel called Chrysanthellus, and she like does these, she's been to Burning Man twice now, and she does these actually very helpful videos of like, here are my trunks, here are my, she's a young biracial woman as well, and it's like, this is what I packed, and like, these are the people that I shipped my thing to, and like, here's where you sign up to be in these camps, and here's how you figure out how to get into the lottery to get a ticket. So like, just that piece of like peeling away the like, it's to the access, the literal access piece also, I think is, you know, it's supposed to be this like open and welcoming community, but you can't even figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
How can we embody anti-racism and transformative justice as individuals?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it starts with like deep personal work, and, you know, educating ourselves, and you know, what are the history of the current systems? How do we get here? And, you know, so there's like an educational piece that we can all take on. You know, it also is, I think there's a huge component of self-care, because like for many, as they learn or experience new things, or take on new information, it's, you know, it's a lot, and it can be tough, or like and so and this is like a sustained effort, right? It's a long-term commitment to be anti-racist.
Yeah.
So, you know, like folks can get burned out, like literally just on like reading up on stuff and having conversations with people, and but you know, just take care of yourself and be in it for the long haul, definitely. And you know, connecting with others outside of your comfort zone, right? And like reaching out to people, and if you're in positions of authority, or like have an organization, for example, and or have a voice, and we all have voices, and just in like different spheres, right? So whatever our sphere is, what are we communicating? Is it anti-racist? If it isn't, then revisit kind of like what we're talking about and rethink it. And also the centering of like marginal voices is in any ways that we can. And you know, these are all like anti-racist elements, and we can all take these on individually in whatever capacity we can, whatever sphere that we have.
I really like that you use the word embody in talking about this, because I think it is in every decision you make, every interaction you have, everything that you consume, media-wise, social media. You know, it's like where you spend your money can be an act of anti-racism. And so it can be really exhausting. And so, you know, being kind to yourself is so important.
Sure.
For BIPOC folks, resting is so important. Finding moments of joy for all of us. Finding moments of joy is so important for sustaining this work.
And for you know, our white allies who may get exhausted, they should remember, you don't have to. You can escape like the structure of oppression. Like we don't really have a choice. Like so, if you're exhausted by just reading a couple of books, imagine what it's like to live the experience. So really be motivated for, you know, changing the experience. And I also like what you said about centering these voices. There's always that, I always see this tendency of folks coming to me with their perspective of what we need to do to fix the situations that are asking those people who are actually experiencing structural racism or poverty, like what is it they need to support them. Oftentimes it's not what you think it is. They just the basics. We're still working on, like supporting our families and things of that nature. So like think about that. Ask the questions.
And I think also I'm very appreciative of, in this current moment, that there has been more of a conversation about recognizing your role. Like what skills do you have and where can you apply those skills to make the most impact? Like not everyone is going to be marching for 20 hours. Not everybody is on the street doing, you know, as a street medic or whatever it is. Like you also need the medicine people that are back in the community. You also need, you know, the teachers and the facilitators and the healers and all of those different pieces. So, you know, take the time to sit with yourself and figure out what is it that you can innately offer to this world? What have you been brought here to offer to this world to make it an equitable place for all of us to live, and a place where all lives are valued, instead of a place where we have to constantly be screaming Black Lives Matter. Like, how do we get to that place, and what is your role in contributing to get us there?
Yeah, I think we talk about like in a protest. We like to have, you know, to keep everyone safe, we like to have white women aligning themselves all around the protest, right? Because they typically don't shoot them with rubber bullets or swing billy clubs in their direction, or, you know, sick, you know, well, we don't do the dog sicking anymore, thank goodness.
Just the bullets.
Just the bullets. They got rubber bullets now. But like, you know, it's part of this is, I mean, what I'm saying is we really need like a white allies to be at the step forward in this conversation, because our people were free 600 years ago, right?
Wait, can you repeat that last thing?
Yeah. Well, like if my opinion really mattered around this conversation about structural racism, it would have been ended 600 years ago. You know, Black and brown people have clearly been disinterested in the structural abuse, right? But we're getting a lot of traction because, you know, people of privilege are uncomfortable now with their privilege and the abuse and assault. So, you know, that it's really important that they not get exhausted, that and really stay active in this, because it's in all of our best interest to like to eliminate this story sooner than later.
I was in a workshop a few years ago, and I would love to offer this question to anybody watching. It was an anti-racist workshop as part of sort of a social justice fellowship that I was in. And the facilitators posed this question to all the white folks in the room, and no one could answer it. And the question was, why is racism bad for you as a white person in America?
Right.
And so I think it's like you really got to dig deep to find a really authentic response to that and truly understand how you like valuing other humans is an intrinsic part of the human experience, sort of, and creating these communities of care and protection. So I think, yeah, it's a tough question, but it's an important one.
Yeah.
No doubt. And, you know, I think one thing we all can do at any level is, you know, where are we viewing the source of the issues or the problems, right? When we're looking at stuff. And something like our current systems of justice are viewing it as like people are the problem, right? But whereas I think moving from that to like the greater environmental and contextual stuff that's going on for people can, you know, is something that we all can do and have conversation about and help others that are, you know, maybe the view might be a little bit more myopic, kind of assist them in expanding that.
Any final thoughts or musings, inspirations, prompts for people who may be listening?
Well, you know, what's interesting is that one thing I am really excited about is that this conversation is happening. And, you know, when other industries or like ideas became more popular, I don't think, you know, I've never heard of Exxon or any of the oil companies having these types of discussion or, so I think I'm really excited that we're having these conversations, and it's a good time to have these conversations, and people are motivated to do something about these things, and they feel and they're willing to get out of their own like comfort zone to so that is something that I don't feel like we saw this type of energy in my lifetime, for sure, for like so many people are concerned about the suffering of everyone, not just themselves. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think piece of this has kind of already been mentioned, but you know, there's so much we all can do at any level, and it's conversation, it's education, it's building connections, right? It's also and just committing to a process of like, this is long term, right? It's not just this moment, but it can be sustained now if collectively we're committing to you know, imagining new ways of being and with one another, as well as you know, if we're you know, like I just use a personal anecdote really quickly. Somebody that I worked with, like post the George Floyd situation, like actually communicated, you know, I contributed to George Floyd. It's like, damn, you know. At the same time, but like, I didn't say this, but I was thinking, you know, like, well, what else? What else are you doing, right? And I love that contribution. But I just hope that it's also like a sustained something else, right? It's that it isn't just this contribution and then I did my part, now I'm moving on, right? Or you know, I'm satisfied with what I've done, we're good. We're good now, right? So it's just like, you know, it's going to take sustained effort in all of us, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really feel that the system is domination based. And as a white person with privilege, like I feel like racism kind of lives in my own body on so many levels, even just the way in which I engage with myself. Like this sort of like domination kind of attitude and judgment that can be so pervasive that there's this sort of like abusive relationship that happens in my own environment and my own like spirit complex based on what I've witnessed as a being in this system. And like my context is, like I've said, privileged, and it's you know, almost doesn't bear mentioning, but what I want to say is that it's everybody's work. And I love your question, Charlotte. Like this doesn't work for anyone. Not even the people who it seems to work for.
Exactly. But it's like, how much do you have to deprogram your mind to get to that point where you're able to see that it also doesn't work for you?
People get to get honest with themselves, and that takes a lot of work for some people. You know, the default conditioning is like strong.
It's so strong.
I mean, we're raised to be very competitive here, to see things from a place of scarcity versus abundance, which is, I think, well, this is all really about that, right? And it doesn't help. What reinforces that is the inequality in general in our society. You know, 1% of the population controls more than 90% of the wealth for the entire world, right? So there's so much inequality and inequity that it's also hard to convince that white ally that there is abundance, right? You know what I mean? And I can see how these people have so much little than I do. I definitely don't want to be there. You know. But, and you know, yes, I think all that is real.
Black Lives Matter. Take it to
Right.
And psychedelics can help us like sense into the humanness, right? Our own humanness, right?
Yes.
And into like the field of shared humanness in such a way that I hope wakes people up into action, like into committed, urgent action, because life is now. And like I said, like for me, nobody wins until we all do. And so we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We do.
I'm excited. We're all excited to be doing it with you guys. So
so grateful. So grateful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your work. It's such a privilege to be in conversation and connection and friendship with you guys. And I look forward to all the more.
Thank
you.
It
was a pleasure.
Charlotte and Drea. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really great to meet you.
Would
love to connect more.
Absolutely. Love your voice and your wisdom. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Let's connect.